All right, here's my inciting incident. This harkens back to Morocco, North Africa, about 12 years ago. I was for 23 years with Campus Crusade for Christ on 3 different continents for 15 years working in campus ministry. It was in January of 2000 that I was visiting one of our campus teams in Casablanca when our staff were finding that for the first time in the history of that part of the world, they were finding the students, and these are Muslim students, had something of a knowledge of the gospel, which was unprecedented, and it was largely attributed to God TV, because I guess God TV had just started doing broadcasts into North Africa. It was in English, it wasn't really translated or kind of made contextually relevant, but the students that our staff were meeting were watching it ostensibly to learn their English, but they were kind of getting this, making some progress, if you will, on the spiritual angle scale. And that really launched me into this process of thinking, how is it that we can use media for the sake of the Great Commission and the Great Commandment? And so we came back from overseas, ended up working with the Jesus Film for 7 years, and then about 5 years ago, with a handful of organizations, including Leighton's group, One Hope, the Jesus Film and some others of us began what is now called the Visual Story Network. And we're a ministry that does a couple of things. We're a global community of visual storytellers building a movement or leading a movement so that everyone can encounter Jesus and His kingdom. And here's how we contribute to that process. The end game for us is life change, that we'd love for everybody on the planet to have the chance to experience life change through Jesus. The way we contribute to this is building a movement of visual stories so that organizations around the world are communicating Christ in a visual way in our visual world. We do a lot of connecting through events and online community webinars and working groups. Anybody who has a passion for Jesus and communicating visually, we want to know, and we want to connect with you, because out of this community comes a lot of collaboration on projects, products, and partnerships. And that's really the sweet spot for us. And increasingly, we want to get involved in actually training new visual storytellers. We live in the age where if you have a mobile device, you are now a filmmaker. What does that really mean? That really means there's a lot of noise. So how do you rise above the noise? Well, you've got to get better. And so that's one of our desires. One of these academically argued questions is, what is the real influence of film and television, internet on an upcoming generation of youth around the world today? You'll get a bit of a variety of answers, but I want to suggest that in some cases, either the sheer volume or the dark nature of some of the content that a young generation pursues is very debilitating. I got to go to the Lausanne gathering in Cape Town, South Africa, just about almost a year and a half ago. The Lausanne Committee's done a lot of stuff, the Lausanne movement. This is one of the papers that talked about media, and it said, media becomes the central shaping force and demise of our cultures and values. Media sets the agenda in a society. Media propaganda in the forms of advertising and political persuasion is shaping the minds of the young. The rise of communication technology such as the internet and digital media creates new threats and opportunities for evangelization. It creates many threats, but also many opportunities for the kingdom. So the question that I live with every day, and I pray that you do as well, is how do we reflect and reveal Christ and His kingdom in the world in which we live? That was me a few years ago. Actually, that was 1989. And the gal to my right, your left, who was on this team that I led, we were in Istanbul, Turkey as missionaries in 1988 and 89. Ended up becoming my wife, dear sweet lady. She was very coy, I will say. That's a very accurate representation of how she treated me that particular year as we fell in love in the city of Istanbul. But when we were there, to be most effective, had to be diligent about trying to speak in the language of the Turks. We learned Turkish. Later, we came back to the seminary, went back overseas, worked in the Paris, France area. To be most effective there, we had to study and learn French to speak the language of the people of that country. And in this stage of the history of the church, it is really important for us as God's people to speak the language of the heart. Increasingly, doesn't matter where you go, it's going to have a visual story component to the language that they understand. All right, we're gonna go, and I'm gonna ask for maybe one or two from each group, and so I'm not looking for repeats. So give me like one or two from your group.
Yeah, we talked about the fact that in some cultures, like in Africa, where we didn't learn traditionally how to read or write, we learned many things through audio visuals, storytelling.
So in Africa, that was more of the learning style.
Yeah, the learning style. So telling stories, but not only speaking, acting, incorporating drum beat and guitar, and we call it call and response.
Yeah.
Type of.
Sure, call and
so
response.
All this was audiovisual, and there are some traditional garbs that they had for special stories, and so all this was part of the decor. So it was audiovisual.
And it was already a part of the culture that you grew up with. Okay, that's very interesting. I'm going to do a quick round. I'm going to maybe come back for another one if I need more material. Give me one of yours.
One of the last ones we talked about is that we're becoming more right-brained in the way that we think.
Ooh, okay. Say that again a little louder. That's interesting.
We're becoming more right-brained.
Okay.
Is that rat brain or
Right-brained. Interesting. Who said that? I'm curious. Just double click on that.
Daniel Pink.
Daniel Pink. All right. Go ahead. Just comment on that a little bit more.
A few years ago, he wrote a book that basically makes the argument that the trend of the United States up until now has been led by the left brain, the computing,
Linear,
linear computing. Now that's becoming automated. The differentiation is design and storytelling.
Concept, story, image.
Dan wrote in his book on the back of a napkin. Same kind of concept.
On the back of a napkin. And what is Daniel Pink's book called?
I don't remember.
It'll come to me. Okay. Let me go back here. So who's the group back here? Give me something from back in this area.
the immersion of tablets in terms of consumption. Everybody has a tablet and is consuming primarily with tablets, and the coming trend of the large-scale content being like the Apple TV and Roku and boxes like that, that democratize content basically, where you have a lot more choice.
Yeah. All right. So technology and the just, if you will, the democratization. There's just more out there. That's interesting. Very powerful. Who was back here? Are you guys another group?
I think just overall, just relevant. It's just a thing to do. You gotta pay attention to it.
All right. Yeah. It's here, and it's not going away. It's here to stay. How about you guys?
Well, one quote that I said was that the makeup man is more important than the speechwriter, and that's from Neil Postman's book, Musing Ourselves to Death. And so he makes the claim that in the past decades we've moved from a text-based word culture to an image-based culture.
And that book's 20 years old at least.
I wish he'd lived long enough to write another follow-up about the internet.
Yeah, I read that back in seminary back in the day. So, but it's still pertinent. Over here.
We discussed the idea of reach, that there's just too many tools out there that allow easy sharing of that information. And so putting a video up on YouTube or Vimeo, or putting on a mobile phone and taking it into the field, or just the ability to move that video around is so easy now that it just doesn't make sense not to.
Because you can.
Yeah.
Because you can. Anybody else want to throw anything else on top of those? Those are, I think they're very helpful. Just,
Daniel Pink's book is A Whole New Mind.
thank you. Yeah, I can picture the orange cover, I believe.
There's one more I'd like to add.
Go, you add it.
We were talking about it being multilingual too, that you can visually explain something without actually using words. You could use video in a way to reach over in other languages without having to use words to do it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we lived in Europe for a while, and we had to do the IKEA. IKEA still does it, but
Yeah.
you get the instructions, you open it up, and there ain't a word on those things. And most of the time, it worked. There were some frustrating moments, but anyway.
Scott McCloud, in his book Understanding Comics, does a lot of work with that idea as well, talking about how images, pictures, and even cartoonish characters translate across all international boundaries, and they're very easy. It's very easy for someone to see themselves in just a circle with a mouth and two dots. Just the idea that these simple visual cues can lead us into much bigger stories.
Yeah, and I like that. Great segue. It can lead us into much bigger stories. I'm going to give you my top 3 very quickly, why it is that we have to adapt to our visual world. It's been stated, I guess, already, but people are talking and reading less and viewing and social networking more. It really is our privilege as followers of Jesus to be able to give the life and the message and the living water of Jesus away. But in reality, that the print process, the preach process, they won't and shouldn't go away, but we have to be candid about how they're perceived and the impact they have. And particularly if we're trying to reach outside of our borders, that's a tough sell. We've got to find ways to bring them in. In America alone, 58% of all high school students will never read a book in its entirety again for the rest of their lives. That's it. Done. Game over. I mean, I'm a reader. I got a garage full of books. I can't read books anymore. It's hard for me. Unless it's a really compelling fiction, I have a hard time pushing all the way through to the end. And so I'm one of these people. And this is the book, The Shallows, by Nicholas Carr, who says the linear mind is being pushed aside by a new kind of mind that wants and needs to, now this is real digital, to take in information and dole out information in short, disjointed, often overlapping bursts, the faster the better. Literally, physiologically, our brains are being reconfigured. I mean, that's just a weird reality of the world that we live in. So, I think it's the Kaiser Family Foundation that every 5 years they do a very extensive study on the consumption of media amongst American youth, ages 8 to 18. They break it into these 5 categories and they just measure how much media are our youth consuming. So, who do you think, I mean, this is alphabetically listed, what would you put at the top of that list? Where is most of the time going? Music? Who would? TV, anybody make another case?
Social networking, it includes things like texting and Facebooking and Twitter.
Okay, well here's the answer from the Kaiser Family Foundation, 2010. The average youth in America consumes 5 hours of film and television a day. What do you put it next? All right, now music. Music comes in with 2.5 hours a day, and then computer social networking, 1.5 hours, and then games. So what comes last? That would be reading. And if you don't know, I mean, you go, well, how do you do 10 hours and 45 minutes a day? It's media multitasking. So they do this in 7 hours and 30 minutes of time. So you're watching TV, you're listening to music, you're texting, whatever. That's the reality.
So is the 40 minutes of reading actually reading your social network?
Yeah, that I don't know. It's a very long study. Yeah, you can download it on our website or you can go Google it. I don't know. But they publish all the results. Good question, though. So here's the reality. The internet, and we all know and love the internet because it's changed our lives, has gone visual. That's just the reality of today and increasingly the one of tomorrow, which gives us things like this, that YouTube is the second largest search engine. It has more traffic than Bing, more traffic than Yahoo, more traffic than all the other ones after Google. And then by the year 2013, 90% of all internet traffic is expected to be video-based. Now, what I don't know, because the source that I got this from didn't clarify, but John Edmiston was telling me that may just be in actual bits of information as opposed to time consumption. So I'm not sure about which way that number goes. But that's the reality. People are talking and reading less. They're viewing and social networking a great deal more. My second reason for really being in this visual age is this technology issue. The rapid expansion of technology makes it possible. Jonathan, to your point, we can. It can be as modest as a clip on a cell phone. It could be a 2-hour feature-length film, but we can. Those things are now accessible. So that means for every organization, a church, a denomination, I don't care how small your nonprofit is, you kind of don't have an excuse. You can dare to get involved in our visual digital age. You know, I mentioned the Bedouin tribesmen. They move around based on cell phone reception. This is another story from the Middle East. This is the goat hair tent of Abu Zayeed. Again, a Bedouin nomadic tribesman. So again, this comes from my friend Keith. Keith tells this story that he was being entertained by Abu Zayeed one evening with some other Bedouin guests. And at some point, after things kind of quieted down, Abu pulls out his cell phone. So he is an avid hunter and a tour guide. He takes people out. And so he started showing Keith and the other guests clips of the game that he has shot next to him with his scope and his rifle. And so he not only took images, he sequenced them together, different images, and then he overlaid that with some tribal a soundtrack. So here you go. Here's Abu Zayeed, probably the first Bedouin music video producer, because he can. He did it on, and it wasn't a smartphone. It was a feature phone. The other word for feature phone is, it's a dumb phone. I mean, they don't have a lot of capacity. But that's the world we live in. So we really don't have an excuse to not be leaning into our visual digital age. If Abu can do it, we certainly should be at least endeavoring to. I assume you're all familiar with the Kendrick brothers' stories. Most people have seen their latter films. Who saw, what's the first one? Flywheel. Anybody see Flywheel? You know, their first movie was a $20,000 church, feature-length film. And then it was the second one that got picked up by Sony. But you know what? These are low-budget pictures, and sure, there's a lot of things you can critique about them. There's shortcomings, but they're getting better. They've set commercial records. And of course, if you're Sony, guess what you're looking at? You're looking at these numbers right here. Those are not small numbers. Now, obviously, the Kendrick brothers have a wonderful heart for the Lord. Their heart is for the gospel. Their goal is they believe that Sherwood Baptist Church can reach the world from Albany, Georgia. And they are. Why? Because they can. And then you'll hear in me, and I know you'll hear it in Chad's next session, and you've already heard it. The mobile thing, if there's a bias in my voice, it is towards this device. This device is the game changer device. Most rapidly adopted technology in human history. So in October, we hit 7 billion people, and now we're going to have that many mobile phone subscriptions. So I did leave you with a link because we aggregate a lot of things, and so you can go here, and this is our page where we just try to capture anybody and everybody who's doing something in this mobile space, events, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a great place to just go and find out some of the things that are going on. And frankly, because it's a wiki, you can go there and you can add your stuff too, so feel free to do that. One of the things that's come out of an initiative that we've been a part of, and Jonathan and some others, is called the Mobile Ministry Forum. We gathered a bunch of people who were involved in mobile devices and ministry spaces, and so we do a consultation every year. We have a lot of different projects. One of the things that's come out of that, John Edmiston, who spoke and will be speaking twice, actually created the world's first mobile ministry online curriculum. And so if you go here, you can find the link to that. The next session, which will be our third, will be starting on June the 26th. It's a 4-week class. And it's like an introduction online to how do you use mobiles in ministry. We are having our next consultation. It will be at the Wycliffe headquarters in Orlando, the end of November, if you want to make a mental note of that. My third reality here about why is people love story. We're hardwired for story. When you tell a good story, you get a good hook, your audience won't leave. You tell your kids, oh, did I tell you the time about when? And then you walk away, like you'll get a mutiny, you get a protest on your hands. We love story. It's just how we're hardwired. Scripture's 2/3 narrative, and it gives us as followers of Christ a tremendous opportunity. We got the best story. We just got to become better storytellers. So in order to really speak to the Yusefs and the Andrews of the world, we've got to see a movement where we lean into this in our organizations and figure out ways that we can reflect and reveal the life-changing message of Jesus to everyone. And I really believe that we're just not that far away from seeing that day come. So now, I'm going to push this back to you. We define This is our loose definition of visual story because we're coming at it from a Christian angle. Combining narrative and visual media and communicating the message of Christ and kingdom. So that said, I want to hear some innovative, just how are you as an entity or organization using it? And I'll pick on you, Faith Village. I don't remember, what's your first name?
Brad.
Brad. Now, I mean, I presume, I haven't seen it, I want to go to the lab and see Faith Village, but, you know, I mean, I presume there's some element of narrative in what you do in Faith Village. I mean,
Very much so.
like, just for example, how does it work?
So we have a whole video channel called The Grove where we curate videos in a wide range of topics and categories. So yeah, it's a huge part of what we do.
Okay, so that,
Users can upload their own videos, user-generated video.
all right.
As well as content partners can upload video.
All right, a Faith Village, which is basically, and a Faith Village is?
A social network for faith experiences.
Okay, social network for faith experiences. Some other ways, somebody else, just help me out. What are ways that you are using the power of visual story in what you do?
We just redesigned our entire site to be video-driven, which is kind of unique for financial services.
Financial services, okay, go. So that's interesting.
Our story is different and compelling, and it is a story, given that we offer all of our services from a very complex technical standpoint from the biblical principles of finance. So we're trying to engage with our core client, which actually is people in their 50s with a lot of money, and try to get them engaged, invited, so much so that they want to take the next step and actually talk a little bit more. So it's more, we're seeing it as a way to create an invitation rather than disseminate information.
Ooh, that'll preach. I don't know if you caught that. That was good. Somebody else, give me another example. Chandler.
From a media perspective, when we're dealing with media, we hear more and more that they don't want the big press release, but they want the few bullet points and then the supplementary multimedia material for their online articles and what have you. Media don't want to publish a story that's text-based anymore. They're wanting us to spoon-feed them the B-roll, the photos and images that we've taken live from the field or what have you with all our different clients. So in terms of traditional media, they're catching up to this and seeing that people want to read less and less of what they've been providing and more of the visual-based stories.
That's interesting. Anybody else got an example? Oh, that was a very dangerous reach for the ear. You're out, man. I outed you. You got to go now.
One of the things that we've been helping clients on the strategy side, not just with the digital side, but their whole organization, is create what's called a vision map. So that it's a, I'll show you several examples, but it basically gives a visual view of the direction of your strategy for your organization. It allows you to communicate well to the board as well as your constituents, and it's just very visual.
Interesting. Anybody else? Leighton, do you have anything for me, man?
Okay.
All right, fair enough. And here's, I think, part of my heart, and even part of the reason why the Visual Story Network was launched is, for the most part, Christian organizations get the visual story when it comes to fundraising. Like, oh, it works. You tell a good 3 or 4 minute, visual story about X, Y, or Z, and people give more money. Unfortunately, we tend to stop there. And so part of I think our challenge as well as our opportunity is, well, how do we go beyond that? I mean, visual story is a very powerful medium. How do we do that for the sake of reaching and teaching? And so here's where I'm going to go. I'm going to give you a couple of ideas or just base level, entry level ways to help my organization take those next steps. So I don't know where you are. I presume that all of you have already moved down this visual digital road to a certain extent, but you'd actually be surprised how many people are really fearful of this road for either lack of knowledge, lack of ways forward, or frankly just fear of, that the old argument that, well, if it's media, it's got to be evil. Well, so here's just some basics. My first point on how do you help your organization move forward is just got to learn what's out there. I mean, you guys are here, so this isn't an issue for you, but help the people around you get their heads out of the hole and help them to see around and say, there's just so much going on. There's so many resources. There's so many things that are happening. And you don't have to learn far. I mean, you can Google anything, but again, just as us as an aggregator, in this case, this is like one of our wiki pages. If you want content, we've got a boatload of hundreds of resources on content, events, films, internet outreach, mobile ministry, production, storytelling. There's stuff out there. Learn what's available. Then secondly is find others that are having success. That's what's great about a thing like this. You know, you go, oh wow, Chad's doing something really interesting, or Jonathan's got this really cool thing. I'm fascinated by that. I want to learn. That's great. Be hungry, 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 and learn from others who are in front of you. You may have to look farther outside your borders. You may have to look outside your city. Look and learn and ask. You know, I mean, that's kind of a big part of the DNA of the Visual Story Network is we'll ask people to get involved and say, hey, can you share this with this group of people? Here's, for example, a partnership project that emerged, and I like this because it takes a visual story in an African context, and it was partnering a couple of organizations together. Pamoja Ministries are based in Tanzania. Their vision is to disciple the nations through media, and they're predominantly in East and South Africa. And so we helped put together them with some other folks. And I love this because these are Maasai, I believe. And this is a music video that was produced in Tanzania that's a teaching tool. And it's being used, it's being distributed out there amongst the various people because everybody has access to like a CD player. CDs are, or VCDs rather, are pretty commonplace. And I'll just show you a part of this 4-minute clip. So you get the idea, you know, combining whatever the culture, whatever the visual story technology format is, just do it. Anybody seen God Provides? I mean, Crown Financial Ministries kind of had an awakening a few years ago. Who's the head? Chuck, help me out here. What's his name? Anyway, I'm blanking. But anyway, you know, he was in Africa, and he was meeting with some people, and you know, they've got some very powerful biblical tools on financial stewardship. And so he heard some of the folks in West Africa say, help us, but show us, don't tell us. And that was actually the inciting incident behind them creating this series called God Provides, which is just, you know, it's like I'm not sure, but it's a series of shorts. I think it's a 6-episode thing taken from the Old Testament, just about how God provides. It shows, and then it teaches and tells later. My last point on moving forward is just do, got ahead of myself. Do something. Take small steps. Learn, you learn a language a few words at a time. Use stuff that's already out there, you know, and then usually then you can get to the point of maturity where you might think about creating something on your own. So this was these are basics, but you know, for my organization, we're on this road, or some are not even on this road, but how do we get farther faster? Now I'm actually I'm gonna speak to you as individuals. How do I, as an individual, if you will, become a visual story practitioner? And I'm going to give you a couple of very simple points that I've found helpful. You, as a follower of Christ, should become a student of story. There's a link there to the 10 Immutable Laws of Storytelling. I love story because we're hardwired for it, but there are principles of story that make story work. And some people know it intuitively, but people go to schools like Biola to learn screenwriting because it's a hard and elusive craft. But I think for businesses, for churches, everybody's got to get story. Ron Blue is figuring out, okay, we got to get story. You know, Chad works with organizations, and his job is to help them get and understand their own story to be able to communicate that. And there are certain ways you do that. There are certain ways you don't do that. Secondly, live into the story that God has given you. I mean, this is the great adventure for which we were created. Saddle up your horses, or as Donald Miller says, I forget I haven't read Donald Miller's book, but to that effect, live into the story that God has made for you. I mean, run hard into it. It's the best way to live. And then tell it. I love telling, I think, and I'm a crusade guy, so we're into the three, I'm an old crusade guy. 3-minute written testimony so that you're ready in season and out to be able to share parts of your life that intersect with someone where they're at, wherever that may be, when you're having a discussion with them. I'm a big believer in knowing the stories in current culture. We miss opportunities because we don't know what's going on, so we miss those water cooler conversations because we got nothing to say, because we don't know anything about the thing they're talking about. I missed one yesterday, and it was last night, and it was, it was our dinner conversation. It was the last Airbender. Not the movie, but anyway, what is it? You know what I'm talking about? Avatar, thank you. I couldn't contribute. Now, you can't know everything, but it's like, okay, now I got to go find out something about Avatar: The Last Airbender, because it came up in the conversation. Hunger Games. I mean, that was kind of a big deal. Who watched the movie? I'll raise them higher. Chandler, raise your hand. Come on, bro. I'm watching you. Okay, who read all the books? And Chandler, why did you read the books?
They were great.
Ooh, why did you read the books? Okay, I knew why you read, but I want to hear, why did you read them?
All the middle school and high school kids I'm ministering to have reading it, going to movies, and I couldn't keep up.
Okay, how about you?
Yeah, kids I knew read them, so I felt like I needed to.
Okay, yeah, my 15-year-old read them and my 10-year-old wanted to, and I said, let me read it first. So that's what sucked me in. It was a great story. Wow, once I read the first one, I got to finish the series. It was a blockbuster in the box office. Every other middle school kid in America knows it. So kudos to you who took the time to figure out. This was my simple take on it. How would you fill in this blank, those of you who've seen the movie or read the books? Hunger Games is a vivid depiction of a world. This was my take. Without God. I thought it was this stunning portrayal of a universe where there is no God. This is kind of what you get. So I thought, and I've had several conversations with people, getting my hair cut or whatever. I thought that was what life would be like without God. You extract God from the universe and that's what you get. Anyway, another point is promote your favorite visual stories. So, have kind of your running list of films or docs or short things or TVs, episodes that you like, and have it on your favorites list, but now in the social networking age, post the links, the trailers, whatever, and now with short format content, your Facebook pages, it's a great way to just share what resonated with your heart. And if it's moved you, inspired you, challenged you, transformed you, share it with others. Create a story, and then this is getting a little to the 300 level, but dare to do something creative. Let God unlock the right brain in you. That's okay. That's okay. It's good. It's good. Do it. And then, as you can get involved, obviously, with the movement. We're just a part of this, what God's doing visually around the world. You can go to visualstory.org. You can sign up. We're on the Ning platform. It's essentially a social networking platform. And then if you really are good, you want to get better, take a course. Learn your craft. And here's where I'm going to wrap, is my 5 golden rules of visual story. And then we'll do some Q&A. My 5 golden rules, first and foremost, is know your audience. And again, I'm not talking rocket science here, but again, you just really need to be clear, because we work with a lot of organizations who do the fire-ready aim approach, and it always creates problem. Chad was telling me about a group that he's working with, and that's they assembled their web strategy. And it's fast at first, but it costs you in the end. So you really got to do due diligence, know your audience. Every communication has an audience. You've got to be clear on who you're communicating with and what you're trying to communicate. It's marketing 101. I understand. For a number of years, I was director of new media at the Jesus Film. This is us on the set of the movie Magdalena. That's Jim Green. That's me. Jim's the director. That thing's been translated into 91 languages. Well over 100 million women have seen that in the last 7 years, all over the world. But we knew who we were targeting. The inciting incident behind this film was when some Campus Crusade staff were in Afghanistan in the Taliban regime, and they saw how women were objectified and oppressed, and it broke their hearts. And they said, how can we help these women have hope? How can we get all of these women the message of hope in Jesus. And that started like a 4-year journey that led to this movie that was ostensibly targeted, if you will, was to this dear sweet woman under the oppressive rule of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. Now, the target was a little bit bigger than that, but we were thinking oppressed women in developing countries. How can we get them the transformational message of Jesus? And it changed a lot of things about how we did the job. It changed who we hired to produce, who wrote, how we screened it, how we tested it, the whole thing. It was a very, very diligent process shaped by the audience. And then you got to know your goal. You know, are you reaching? Are you teaching? Are you preaching? They're all different. And every communication has a message. Don't be apologetic about having a message. Everybody has a message. Everybody's selling something in some way, but just know what your goal is. And then be clear and be laser focused on it. Then know your technology. You know, now that we have these different platforms, it really does change the game. How we create content, how we use and distribute content. So again, whether it's the big screen, television screen, computer screen, or, you know, now frankly, a big idea behind the smaller screen is it's a smaller screen, everybody's got it, but you're probably not going to watch a 2-hour feature-length film on there unless you're really desperate. You know, you got to think 60, 90, maybe 120 seconds as a kind of a rule of thumb for the smaller screens. Another principle is know story. As I mentioned earlier, there's story as an art. It kind of has certain principles that make it work, things that kill it very quickly. And there's great resources out there. Obviously, if you're a screenwriter, this is the book that you have to know. But the story waters run deep. And then lastly is know your craft. If you're doing a web page, you got to know how to code, to design, to do functionality. If you're doing film, you got to know how to do sound, lighting, editing, directing, acting. Any failure in any component of the craft can more or less sink your ship or make it take on a lot of water fast. Now, I will say this. That being said, we did a film festival that ran for about 7 years called Damah. Damah was a Hebrew word for parable. In fact, we used to have our board meetings here at here at Biola for a couple of years. And, you know, we had short films submitted to us from all over the world. And one of the things we realized is after 7 years and 1,500 short films, and if you watch 1,500 short films, I mean, you just get, and this is over the course, we get a couple hundred every year, you kind of know within 30 seconds what you're getting. And just out of care for the filmmaker, because you know this person poured heart, soul, money, and their grandmother's money probably into this. You try to watch it past the 30 to 60 second mark. But you've got to know your craft. But if you have a compelling story, you can cover some of the sins of craft lacking. But I just say that very tentatively. If your story stinks, I don't care if you spend $100 million, that's the problem. That's why, I mean, how many movies do you tell other people about you have to go out and watch? Not many, because there aren't that many great stories out there. But you need to know your craft. You really do have to excel. And, you know, again, back to Yusuf and Andrea, that's why I do what I do, is because my life was transformed. We want to give away this life-transforming message of Christ. I believe we have the capacity in the next 10 to 15 years. What I see God doing amongst His people, individually, organizations, and then corporately in partnership, we're seeing some very fresh moves of God's Spirit where the news is getting out, whether that's, again, on whatever screen platform. And so we get to be a part of that generation that will, I believe, finally kind of get to that place where we've made disciples of all the nations, where we've preached the gospel to all creation. We still have a ways to go. Q&A, but first I want to show you a little story that I like. And I just met Jen in the last couple of weeks. She's the Director of Communications at Eastside Christian Church, not far from here. I forget exactly where. Yorba Linda, thank you. Came up with an innovative idea to tell a story as a part of their church. And I just liked it, so I'm just going to watch, or have us watch a clip from here. Oh, nuts. I'm not on the internet. I guess I won't. That stinks. There it goes. anyway, I just love the innovation in the storytelling. Just give us 20 seconds on this. I mean, I've never heard of a Facebook timeline visual story, but I like it.
We just celebrated our 50th anniversary, and so we're trying to think of a different way to tell, you want to go through sort of your 50 years of history. And we got the idea to use the new Facebook timeline. It had only been live like 2 months, I know, at the time. So we were like, what if we made a video out of our time, like our literal timeline? And so I told Clyde, at the time, I think we might be the first church to tell a 50-year-old story in a 2-month-old technology. So and we did it actually really quickly. So now I look at it and I'm like, oh, we haven't changed. But overall, we told the story. I don't think that you could be a new person and you could still sort of get the sweep of the story arc of Eastside Christian Church.
All right. Well, excellent. All right, any comments for questions? Floor's open.
Something that keeps plaguing me, given that our audience generally is older, are you continuing, the folks that are in their 50s and 60s and 70s who tend to have a struggle with digital media,
Yeah.
there's still folks in that need to be reached, and also folks who you want to sell products to, and folks you want to get money from, and particularly in that age group. How can you continue to use this idea of digital media and technology to reach a group that tends to be technologically averse?
That's a good question. My first answer is usually, because most of the times I get that question, it's in this context of, how do I raise money because my donor base is 63, but we're trying to reach, a 17-year-old. In that case, I always say, well, tell them we're reaching your grandchild, because they get that, even though they don't get the technology. That's a great question. How do you reach that older audience? I don't know. I don't have any brilliance on that other than try to figure out where they're at. I mean, I'll give my mom. My mom's 71 and a half. She's fairly savvy, just because she figured out if she wants to stay in touch with her grandkids, she better as heck figure out how to text. So now she's learned how to text, and of course she's got her Facebook page, primarily because she wants to be able to stay in touch with the grandkids. I don't know. Anybody just want to comment on that? That's a great question.
Well, older people are consumers of visual media as well. I mean, television, for one. And so if you capitalize on the visual media that they're familiar with and try and come up with something that looks like something they're comfortable with, I'm not an expert in.
Yeah, I think it is. It's trying to figure out where the audience is and how can you speak to them. I guess I go back to this idea of story. If you can find ways to tell compelling stories that help move those folks from where they are and where you'd want them to be, that's always transformational. Go ahead, Jonathan.
You might just need to change the platform you use. So one example would be bring an iPad when you're discussing things with people and use that to present. Because number one, it's not a terrifying device. People look at it and go, oh, this is interesting. And it also you can show visual stories on it, which is really nice. So I think changing your platform, you're not going to go to a social media website and try to attract that type of clientele.
Right.
You might be able to get their children, but you're not going to probably get them.
Right.
So it's just figuring out what medium you need to do it in, and maybe just going door to door with a device and introducing them to technology as you do it.
That is what we're doing in a lot of our initial client meetings for that exact reason, to continue to be. And we are very family oriented. We want to talk about how you're thinking about your resources for God's purpose long term with your kids too, so it all kind of ties in. So that's really helpful.
Boy, tied into the grandkids, boy, that's the heartstring. Did you have a comment or question?
Yeah, we just transitioned from a paper bulletin type thing to a very paperless bulletin and sent out all of our announcements via email. And I had a group of bulletin stuffers that were probably all 70 plus, who I thought would freak out, and they all were like, that's great, I'll get it in my email. And I was like, you guys all have email? Like, I was thinking I was gonna have to teach a class on how to create an email account, and they were all cool with it. So I think that for the most part, even some older people, or the majority of older people at this point are.
So maybe not have a misconception then.
Yeah, because I thought the same thing, like we're gonna have freaking out people, and we haven't had hardly any pushback. The only pushback we've had is from like a 40-year-old guy. And I'm like, you're just crazy.
Ask your clients.
Go ahead. Tell me your name.
That I have from my client was because we do the media management where we're pushing video of sermons and everything online. But with the older population that doesn't have internet in their house, you're running into the same problem if the church doesn't have a radio ministry or something like that. So what they were doing was Roku boxes with the little USB on the back, and they just plug in you leave a little this side up, they plug it in, and someone drops it off at their house when they're doing the care ministry. So they've got the church on their TV. It's a $50 box.
Really?
And so that's pretty cool.
That's interesting. Go ahead.
There's also email marketing services now where the video is embedded in the email, so they don't have to click off to YouTube or somewhere. There's a firm called BombBomb, which is run by Christians out of Colorado somewhere. I ran into these guys at a conference early this year. But it's really slick because the video is delivered, embedded in the email.
Yeah.
And so it's right there. Just click and play. And you don't have to go somewhere else to view it.
I like that, thank you.
One story that really gripped me, we're just starting to do live streaming at our church, but the one that got me was not the fact that young adults and the unchurched, that's a target audience. So we were out at an older adult's home, and there was a gentleman in our church who had become homebound. He could not leave anymore, and yet he was very computer savvy. And he said to me, we were talking about this topic, and he said, I really want you to try to do live streaming, because my church is now Boston Avenue, which is a Tulsa church that he watches on TV. And he said, if you would live stream Central, the church I work at, he said, then I could get my church back.
Ooh.
And it was a really compelling story to hear, and I've told that story a few times along the way, maybe a little more embellished in longer fashion than I did here, just so that we can try to show people that there are older adults who really are very, very technologically savvy and would utilize that technology given the opportunity.
Then I can get my church back. Ooh.
Get my church back.
Any other comments, questions? Anybody? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have a question. So, speaking of the other end of the audience, the younger people, you made a good case that we're much more visual than we have been ever before. But I wonder if we're sort of coming back around, because in the 80s, young people only watched things, but now they're texting and they're writing more than they ever did before. And we just talked about Hunger Games. Here's all these middle schoolers reading 3 long books, not for school. And so, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. I'm doing the how to do video thing tomorrow morning. So
yeah, right. So you're a true believer.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But what about that side of it?
That side, becoming more text-based.
Yeah.
What's interesting is statistically, actually more people are reading now than they were in the 50s. In around 1950 or 1948 or something, 25% of Americans were reading a book. 5 years ago, that number was up to 50% of Americans were reading a book. And it may be the fact that it's so easy to get books on iDevices, things like that. I'm not sure exactly what, but those are what the statistics are. It may be that they're not spending as much time per day reading, but people are reading.
Now, I'll just use myself as a case study. I'm reading, but man, I'm telling you, unless it's a good, compelling fiction like Hunger Games, I am not finishing. It's got it, and I'll just bring that back to this idea of story. I think that is really crucial, is if we can effectively communicate story. Story is what really speaks to the heart, draws us, like you got to have the resolution in a story. I had to read all 3 books. I had to know how the dumb thing ended. But anyway.
But back, talking about that, though, one of the things they're noticing, the trend today, is people read, but they'll start reading and they'll go, ooh, link, click. They'll read a little bit of another article, ooh, link, click. And so people are getting a very shallow understanding of things. Like it's just a very nasty habit. Right?
I hate that.
I'm that way now. And it's
I can't stand to read that way.
Yeah.
It
But
drives
then
me
if I
nuts.
see a video, I'll play it all the way through usually. Whereas like reading, I'll usually flick onto it to click if I need to.
So I guess the big question is this the long term? We're positive, like you say, Twitter's going away eventually, and obviously it didn't. Is this a long term trend? Are we sure of this? I mean, obviously we're not sure of anything. But is this the direction we should throw all of our eggs in this basket, or should we continue to do it in lots of different ways?
Well, yeah, I think your answer is that, and the question is, it is. I think it's all of the above. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we talk about the preach, print, portray paradigm. Historical 2,000 years. preaching and print don't go away. We need to incorporate this age of portrait and take advantage of the opportunities that it presents. I think, frankly, I think that's one of the best ways to get people's attention who are outside of the church. For example, that's my heartbeat, is if you tell a great story, you can get somebody to begin to think about something they never would have otherwise considered. Eventually, you got to bring them in. You got to get to the heart. You got to get them growing in Jesus. But even so, with those, you can do reaching and teaching in visual ways as well. I don't know, anybody want to comment on that? I don't presume to be an expert.
Yeah, something I've been thinking about maybe really all day, I think has to do with how do we not just give away the heart by getting more and more information packed in. And I think the answer for me came from my granddaughter who read Hunger Games, and she wanted to tell me the story, and I hadn't read it. So I just spent an hour and a half listening to her tell me the story, and then I started asking her questions, and it was the first time she really thought about the story beyond the storyline.
Yeah.
And it was a teaching moment for both of us. And I think that is a key piece that has to be in anything that we do when it comes to preaching, teaching, or media.
And I'll just say, from the parenting angle, my kids are 18 and 16 and 10, now 11. You monitor and contain as best you can, realizing that it's a porous world. But at the end of the day, you have to help them figure out how to discern, what to watch, and then even think about what they've just watched. Because
can we do that when it's not just our grandchildren?
Fair question. Who had a hand up over here? Anybody else?
I liked the heart of what you're saying in terms of exposing people to stories, but then asking them those questions and having them do the critical thinking past it. So I think the follow-up to our storytelling has to be more conversational, and ultimately that's the problem with our digital age, is getting back to being conversational, and that's ultimately my.
And that's fair. That's legitimate.
So, is that really? We're still relational. God still made us that way. This is why we have a heart for Him and a hunger for Him. So how do we keep this conversational and relational, and not just presenting?
Especially in the context of what you were talking about, somebody back up there, the democratization of communication. How do we differentiate between what I call dumbing down and propaganda, and I think kind of satanic-based resistance to God from the important messages that we have to get out. Being in the world but not of the world. Those kinds of issues really concern me.
And at the end of the day, true life change will only happen in relationship and in community. So this is not a silver bullet, but it should be a part of our ability to reveal and reflect the kingdom of God. But that is a challenge. When everybody, now it used to be if you were in the line in the store, you might talk to the person, in front of you, but now everybody's, we're all in our bubbles, and that's a tricky one. I don't know the answer to that one.
I was just going to say, I think we view these things as tools and mediums, and not as the end, what we're trying to accomplish, because of the relational aspects that are so critically important to our growth in Christ, discipleship, and sharing the gospel. But these are tools that are available, and they're excellent tools. And like anything, as we look at these things from a Christian worldview, it's whether they're business principles or whatever these tools are, but that we don't take them too far. And we always understand the heart of the gospel, and that won't change.
Maybe one last thought, because that made me think of my son. My son just finished his first year of college. He's 18, and great kid, and he's on a good path. I pray he never becomes a train wreck, but right now we're finally, we've seen it, but it's coming out in ways that are really stunning to us, how his faith has become his own. And I mean, he's very sincere, he's very devoted, he's a leader, he's an influencer. And when I think back now, because he's essentially launched, I mean, you know, he's out. So one of the things, amongst others, is that we were very intentional, and now it's kind of in hindsight, you see what we did, but we exposed him, he saw the real thing. And I think that's what changed his life, and that's what changed my life. When you see the real thing, there's no apologetic against it. There's no other better story. There's no other life-giving story like the one we have in Christ. And so that's why I came to faith. I saw guys living something I didn't have, but I saw it. I mean, it was real. They later told me what it was, but first I saw what it was. And I think for Quinn, he saw it obviously in his parents. Then we had a boatload of people come through our house because we lived overseas, and like whenever and wherever we could, we'd tell them the stories. So whether it was our stories or having friends come over for dinner or telling stories about, you know, Youssef Nadarkhani, who's been in prison in Tehran for the last 150 days or whatever. Like, this is the real deal. And if they see it, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out there ain't anything else that matches that. So, you know, I guess it's sort of just let them see the real thing. And this is just another way for that to happen, is how can we help people see the real thing, you know? Anyway, that's my father's heart.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.